Welcome back to the 7-minute therapy session. My name is Seth Needing. And in the past several videos, we've talked about how do we change and the change process. And we focused primarily on how do we change our thoughts. And we've also used several examples from overcoming depression to obtaining joy. So as you recall, there's two fundamental principles in the change process that we need to remember. The first one is that change is always a two-step process. In order to make fundamental changes in the way we think or in the way we feel or in the way we behave or in our relationships, the first step is to throw off that which we want to get rid of or change. But it's not enough to have stopped thought or stopping a behavior. We must have thought substitution, behavioral substitution, in order to have long-term lasting change. The second principle we've talked about is that change is like a chain or like a series of dominoes. In other words, the way we think impacts the way we feel, which impacts the way we behave, which impacts our behavioral patterns or habits, which impacts our character or our personality, and it impacts the journey as we go through life and eventually our destiny. So in the past couple of sessions, we've talked about how to take our thoughts captive and changing the way we think. And today's session, we're going to be talking about how to overcome our emotions and take control of our emotions, take charge of our emotions rather than being emotionally led. Fundamental emotions that most therapists deal with, people come because they have depression, they have anxiety, they have anger issues. And so we've given a few examples in the past videos about overcoming depression. So today I want to talk a little bit about overcoming anxiety. So there are different types of anxiety, and there's anticipatory anxiety, there's social anxiety, there's generalized anxiety disorder, there's panic attacks, there's very specific phobias, there's acute stress whenever there's a trauma, or perhaps afterward there's post-traumatic stress disorder. There's agoraphobia, or being so paralyzed by anxiety that the person has difficulty leaving their home. And there's obsessive compulsive disorder, which is also in the anxiety spectrum, because usually people with obsessive compulsive disorders are attempting to gain control over the things in their life that they generally feel out of control with. One of the core issues in most anxiety is fear of losing control, being out of control, or feeling helpless. So some of the symptoms that people with anxiety experience have to do with perhaps pounding, racing heart, shortness of breath, lightheadedness, dizziness, nausea, sometimes numbness or tingling. And that's why a number of individuals will actually make a number of visits to the emergency care center feeling as though they're going to have a heart attack, and usually they'll keep them for a while and monitor their heart to find out that they're having non-cardiac distress. With stressfulness and anxiety, we can lose our concentration, making it very difficult to maintain focus. Our short-term memory may also be impaired. Sometimes there's irritability. Particularly with prolonged anxiety, people can get very depressed or very irritable because they hate feeling that way. There can be a choking sensation, stomach distress, and with all the symptoms together, sometimes people just feel a fear as though they're going to die or go crazy. So some of the secular models for dealing with anxiety, I think one of the best clinical practices, the best clinical protocols are a combination of an anti-anxiety medication in combination with therapy. One of the very effective therapies has to do with mindfulness or meditation on being present, focusing on the here and now rather than worrying about what happened to us yesterday or what we may have anticipatory anxiety or worries about what we're going to go through tomorrow. So being present can help us realize that being in the present, it may make us feel more safe, more secure, such as paying attention to what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we smell, what we taste, and that way it keeps us grounded in the present. Another effective technique can sometimes being bracketing off our anxiety and actually having a worry time. And now that may sound a little ridiculous, but just being able to take a time and say, I'm going to focus on between a certain time of the day, my worries. And what's really helpful is if there's some journaling that may occur during that time, because one effective technique of reducing anxiety is to externalize, verbalize, write down, get the anxiety from inside, outside. In other words, people with high anxiety are very good at introjection, taking in anger, sadness, worries, grief, sorrow, guilt from the world and holding it in, pushing it down. And the opposite process is to externalize, verbalize, write it, keep a journal, and get it out. I particularly like the technique of when people can get outside of their focus, because again, people with anxiety are very aware of their internal process. They may be aware of how their heart is beating, their pulse, their temperature. To be able to get outside of oneself and focus outward, and to perhaps engage in a conversation with other people, which gets us outside of ourselves. And then another technique is cognitive reframing. A lot of times people with anxiety will catastrophize rather than catastrophizing, to cognitively reframe or relabel the event that they're going through as uncomfortable rather than catastrophic, or perhaps from intolerable to tolerable, or that they are able to cope. And I have found the spiritual model to be perhaps the most effective for long-term permanent change. I can use an example of myself that happened to get caught in a horrendous storm in a helicopter over Hawaii. Now normally I'm afraid of heights, and it was sitting out in the front in the bubble, and the helicopter's going like this, and right away what came to my mind was God knows my day and He knows my hour. And that brought me complete peace. And I could have went through the rest of the tour clutching the seat and worrying about crashing and what was going to happen, which wouldn't have changed the event at all. Or just to simply say, okay, I don't have control over this. God's in control of my life. If this is the day I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And if it's not, I'm not. And so I completely and thoroughly was relaxed and really enjoyed the tour. So in order to get to that spiritual realm, the Bible tells us how to do that. In Isaiah, in the Old Testament, over 4,000 years ago, there's great biblical wisdom on how to deal with anxiety. It says, He, meaning God, will keep us in perfect peace, all who trust in Him, and those whose thoughts are fixed on Him. So by fixing my thoughts on the spiritual realm, by looking through spiritual lenses, not just secular lenses, putting those on and say, where's God's hand in my life at this moment? I find that I have incredible peace, and I walk through the world in a different way. Things that go on in the world are less impactful to me, and I think more about the spiritual realm. So I hope that you have found this 7-minute therapy session valuable for you. If this video is helpful to you, and you know other people that are suffering from anxiety, I would appreciate your sharing it with them. And if you want to go further with this, again, you can download my book as a free PDF download at biblicaltherapyseth.com. And again, wishing you mental health and many blessings.